Admiral HFY of the Galactic Federation Navy stared at the tactical display with what could only be described as professional confusion. The human ship Defiant Hope hung motionless in the void, a mere speck of metal and ceramics surrounded by 12 massive Korthak battle cruisers. Each enemy vessel was the size of a small moon, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with predatory hunger. By every military doctrine known to the civilized galaxy, the humans should have surrendered immediately or better yet, never engaged at all. Status report, HFY commanded, his 4 arms working the control interfaces with practiced efficiency. His species had evolved for multitasking in zero gravity, and his bridge reflected that evolutionary advantage with controls positioned at impossible angles for bipedal creatures. The human vessel refuses to acknowledge our surrender demands, reported Lieutenant Kralvex, his tactical officer. The young officer's voice carried a note of bewilderment that HFY found unprofessional but understandable. They claim they are, and I quote, "Just getting started, sir." HFY's secondary heart skipped a beat. The Korthak had been the Federation's most feared enemy for 3 centuries. Their ships were biological monstrosities, grown in the depths of gas giant atmospheres rather than built in shipyards. Each vessel was a living creature, armed with plasma cannons that could melt through neutronium armor and equipped with regenerative hull plating that could repair battle damage in real time. They bred their ships for one purpose: total annihilation of anything that opposed them. In 300 years of warfare, they had never lost a battle when they held numerical superiority. Captain Sarah Chen's voice crackled through the comm system, transmitted through quantum entanglement across the electromagnetic chaos of the battlefield. Federation vessel, this is Captain Chen of the Terran Defense Force. We appreciate the assist, Admiral, but we've got this situation completely handled. HFY activated his personal communication channel, ensuring privacy from his bridge crew. Captain Chin, he replied, his translator converting his native clicking language into human standard English, you are outnumbered 12-1. According to our intelligence reports, your ship's primary weapons are primitive kinetic projectiles. This isn't bravery, this is suicide. A pause stretched across the void, filled only by the background hum of ship systems and the distant electromagnetic screaming of the Korthak bioships as they prepared their weapons. Then something impossible happened: laughter. Actual human laughter, warm and genuinely amused, as if Captain Chin had just heard the galaxy's best joke. Admiral HFY, Chen's voice carried a tone that somehow managed to be both respectful and condescending. You clearly haven't read our species profile thoroughly. Allow me to provide you with a quick education in human military doctrine. The first Korthak ship moved into firing position with predatory grace, its bioluminescent hull pulsing in rhythmic waves as internal organs charged its primary weapon systems. The plasma cannons began to glow with an ominous orange light that had been the last sight of countless Federation crews. HFY had witnessed this terrifying display dozens of times in previous engagements. It never failed to send ice through his veins. Tactical, what is the human ship doing? HFY asked, his voice tight with concern. The Defiant Hope should have been powering weapons or preparing evasive maneuvers, but the sensor readings made no sense. Sir, they appear to be jettisoning cargo? Lieutenant Kralvex's voice climbed an octave in confusion. His 4 eyes blinked independently as he verified his readings twice, then 3 times. On the tactical display, the Defiant Hope was indeed releasing objects from its cargo bay. Lots of objects, hundreds of them, drifting in seemingly random patterns. HFY's enhanced vision and the ship's magnification systems picked out individual items that defied all military logic. What appeared to be furniture? Kitchen appliances? Random mechanical components that belonged in a scrapyard rather than a battlefield? Captain Chen, what are you? HFY began, but was cut off. Ever hear of kinetic bombardment, Admiral? Chen's voice carried the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans rather than imminent death. Basic physics, every object in the universe has potential energy. The trick is knowing how to convert potential to kinetic at exactly the right moment and trajectory. The first piece of junk, what HFY's enhanced sensors identified as a standard cooking stove, complete with heating elements and what appeared to be a small oven, struck the leading Korthak ship. At relativistic speeds achieved through some impossible human engineering, the simple kitchen appliance punched through the bioarmor like a hypervelocity projectile through tissue paper. The massive enemy ship convulsed, its living hull screaming across electromagnetic frequencies as it began venting atmosphere and biological fluids into the void. Impossible, whispered Lieutenant Kralvex, his voice barely audible above the bridge's ambient noise. "Oh, Admiral," came Chen's cheerful voice over the comm, "we're just getting started here. Fire control, activate the kitchen sink protocol." More debris launched from the human ship in coordinated volleys. A washing machine, spinning at tremendous RPM like some kind of gyroscopic missile, became a kinetic penetrator that shattered the command deck of a second Korthak vessel. Dining chairs, welded together in sequence and fired in rapid succession, created a devastating shotgun effect that shredded bio-armor across multiple ships. Even a child's bicycle, its frame somehow accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, became a ship killer that left Zexhai staring in professional awe. The remaining Korthak ships began evasive maneuvers, their living hulls rippling and contorting in ways that would have been impossible for conventional vessels. Bioships had one advantage over mechanical craft: they could literally reshape their profiles mid-flight, morphing from sleek interceptor configurations to heavily armored defensive postures. Their neural networks, evolved over millennia of predatory behavior, calculated threat vectors and adjusted accordingly. But the humans had somehow anticipated even this biological adaptation. "Sir, the human vessel is launching." "I'm not sure how to classify these objects," Lieutenant Kralvex reported, his voice straining with the effort of describing the impossible. "Sensors indicate musical instruments?" The Defiant Hope was now deploying what appeared to be a complete orchestra's worth of instruments, each one modified with some kind of propulsion system. Zexhai watched in fascination as brass instruments, woodwinds, and percussion equipment sailed through space with deadly precision. "Sensors confirm that was a piano," the tactical officer announced, his voice cracking with disbelief. "A full-size acoustic piano, Admiral. It registered on gravitational sensors before impact." The piano, spinning end over end at 0.3 C like a massive, melodic projectile of death, had sheared through two Korthak ships in a single devastating pass. The beautiful Steinway Grand had carved through bio-armor, command decks, and weapons systems with the efficiency of a buzzsaw through paper. Alien blood and organic circuitry sprayed into the vacuum in a grotesque fountain of destruction. "Captain Chin," Zexhai called, struggling to maintain professional composure while witnessing the systematic destruction of the galaxy's most feared fleet by household items, "how did you even get a piano aboard a military vessel?" "Morale officer insisted on it for crew entertainment," Chin replied with casual pride. "Figured if we're going to have classical music aboard, might as well make it a Steinway Grand. Cost more than some frigates, so we figured it better earned its keep in combat if necessary." The human ship was now deploying sporting equipment with military precision. A baseball, electromagnetically accelerated through what must have been a linear accelerator system, punched through a Korthak command deck like a hypersonic bullet. Tennis balls, launched in rapid-fire sequences and trailing monofilament wire, created a deadly net that sliced through bio-armor with surgical precision, turning living ships into geometric puzzles of severed tissue. "Sir," Lieutenant Kralvex's voice was now almost reverential with awe, "they just fired what appears to be a complete set of golf clubs. Each club is following a different trajectory and they're all finding targets." The golf clubs, their dense metal heads gleaming in the starlight, found their marks with frightening precision. The Korthak were down to 5 ships, their formation shattered. "New contact," the sensor operator announced, his voice tight with alarm. "Korthak reinforcements jumping in system. 20 ships, Admiral, including 3 Dreadnought-class vessels." Zexhai's primary and secondary hearts began racing in synchronized panic. The biosignatures were massive, each reinforcement ship larger than anything in the current engagement. Even with the humans' impossible improvisation and their talent for turning mundane objects into instruments of destruction, they couldn't possibly face these odds. The mathematics of warfare were absolute, there were limits to what creativity could overcome. "Captain Chin, you need to retreat immediately," Zexhai transmitted urgently. "This is no longer tactical disadvantage, this is hopeless. Those dreadnoughts carry enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. Retreat." Chen's voice carried genuine surprise, as if the concept hadn't occurred to her. "Admiral, we haven't even deployed the good stuff yet. We're just getting warmed up here." Her tone shifted to address her crew. "Attention all hands, this is the captain speaking. Break out the emergency rations. All of them. Every last can, package, and container." "Emergency rations?" Zexhai was beyond confused now, his tactical training failing to provide any framework for understanding human military doctrine. What emerged from the Defiant Hope's cargo bay defied every principle of military logic that Zexhai had learned in 4 decades of service. Canned goods, thousands upon thousands of them, began launching in coordinated volleys that spoke of careful planning and precise calculations. The containers moved in formation like tiny missiles, each one following a predetermined trajectory towards specific targets on the Korthak reinforcement fleet. Sensors indicate those containers are pressurized? Lieutenant Kralvex reported, his voice climbing with bewilderment. Sir, they appear to be standard food preservation units, but they're reading as active explosive devices. The first wave of cans struck Korthak hulls and detonated like miniature grenades, spraying their contents across the living armor in colorful explosions. Tomato sauce, beans, preserved fruits, and various other foodstuffs erupted across bio-armor in what should have been merely messy rather than militarily significant. But the effect was far from cosmetic. The acid content, Chin explained conversationally as if discussing a cooking recipe rather than chemical warfare. Turns out Korthak bio-armor has a particular vulnerability to citric acid, vinegar, and certain food preservatives. Who knew that centuries of food science would prove tactically relevant? The effect was devastating and immediate. Korthak ships began writhing in apparent agony as their living hulls started dissolving, creating massive breaches that emergency biological patches couldn't repair fast enough. The chemical burns spread like infection across their organic surfaces. Also, Chin continued with obvious pride, pressurized cans make excellent fragmentation grenades when you know how to modify the release mechanisms. Our chief engineer used to work in food service before joining the military. Terrible job, but the skills transfer beautifully to warfare. 17 Korthak ships were now combat ineffective, their crews evacuating in terror. The remaining Korthak ships were regrouping with the desperate efficiency of a cornered predator, their bioneural networks finally beginning to process the unprecedented threat they faced. Their formation tightened into a defensive sphere, living armor plates shifting and overlapping to present smaller target profiles. Weapon ports sealed themselves behind protective tissue and sensory organs retracted into armored cavities. They were adapting, learning, evolving their tactics in real time, exactly what made them the galaxy's most feared enemy. They're adapting to our attack patterns, HFY observed, his tactical training finally finding familiar ground. Standard Korthak defensive protocol, they're minimizing surface area and vulnerable points. So are we, Chin replied with the confidence of someone who had clearly anticipated this development. All hands, this is the captain speaking. I need everyone to contribute to the war effort immediately. Check your personal belongings, your lockers, your private storage compartments. Everything goes into the fight. This is total war, people, and we're going to win it with everything we've got. Captain Chun, surely you don't mean... HFY began, horrified at the implications. Oh, I absolutely do mean it, Admiral. Chun interrupted firmly. Johnson, I want your entire collection of vintage comic books. Every issue. Every special edition. Rodriguez, your grandmother's china set that you've been saving for retirement. Stevens, yes, even your signed baseball cards from the 2387 World Series. This is war, people, and sentiment is a luxury we can't afford right now. The human crew began jettisoning personal items with the systematic efficiency of a well-drilled military unit. But these weren't random, desperate throws. Each object was carefully modified with improvised guidance systems and precisely aimed using calculations that defied HFY's understanding of ballistics. The humans had somehow turned their most cherished possessions into guided weapons. A collection of hardcover books, their pages fanned out and edges sharpened to razor keenness, created a deadly cloud of paper projectiles that found microscopic gaps in bio-armor with surgical precision. Ceramic plates and cups, fragmented at calculated angles and accelerated to hypersonic velocities, became shrapnel that savaged Korthak sensor arrays and communication nodes. Sir, Lieutenant Kralvex's voice was barely audible above the bridge's ambient noise. They just weaponized? Is that a teddy bear? The stuffed animal, packed with improvised explosives and accelerated to combat velocity, had punched through a Korthak command ship's primary bridge. The explosion took out their central command node, leaving the massive vessel drifting helplessly. Little Emma gave that to me when I got my commission. Chen's voice carried genuine sadness for the first time in the engagement. Said it would keep me safe in the big scary universe. Guess she was right, just not in the way either of us expected. Only 3 Korthak ships remained functional, but they were the largest and most formidable vessels in the enemy fleet, dreadnought-class bioships that had survived countless battles across 3 centuries of galactic warfare. Their armor was thick enough to withstand direct hits from Federation plasma cannons, their regenerative capabilities so advanced they could regrow entire sections of hull mid-battle. These were the apex predators of space combat, vessels that had personally destroyed entire Federation task forces. Captain, Zexhai said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of impending defeat, "You've accomplished the impossible here today, but those are capital ships. You need proper military-grade weapons for vessels of that magnitude." "Admiral, with all due respect," Chin interrupted, her tone carrying the patient firmness of someone explaining basic concepts to a child, "you still don't understand humans very well after all this time. We don't believe in proper weapons or appropriate responses. We believe in effective solutions, regardless of how unconventional they might appear to outside observers." The Defiant Hope began to rotate slowly around its central axis, the entire hull spinning with increasing velocity. Emergency lights flickered across its surface as systems strained under forces they were never designed to handle. The ship's structural integrity warnings must have been screaming, but somehow the vessel held together through what could only be described as stubborn human engineering. "Sir, they're not launching anything new," Lieutenant Kralvex reported, his voice tight with confusion. "They're just spinning faster and faster. Their rotational velocity is approaching critical structural limits." "Attention Korthak vessels," Chen's voice broadcast on all available frequencies, transmitted through quantum entanglement to ensure every enemy ship received the message, "You might want to begin evacuation procedures immediately. We're about to demonstrate why humans are considered the galaxy's premier problem solvers and why our species has never met a situation we couldn't improvise our way out of." The human ship suddenly stopped its rotation and fired its main engines at maximum thrust, not forward toward the enemy or backward in retreat, but perpendicular to its rotational axis. The entire vessel became a massive kinetic projectile, spinning like a colossal drill bit as it accelerated toward the nearest Korthak dreadnought with suicidal determination. "She's turned her entire ship into a weapon," Zexhai breathed, his voice filled with a mixture of horror and professional admiration. "She's weaponized the concept of weaponization itself." At the last possible second, as collision became inevitable, the Defiant Hope fired escape pods in all directions like seeds from an exploding fruit. The main hull, still spinning at tremendous velocity, punched through the Korthak dreadnought's bio-armor like a hypersonic bullet through tissue paper. The massive enemy ship simply disintegrated, its living components unable to maintain cohesion against such overwhelming kinetic force. The remaining 2 Korthak vessels immediately began broadcasting unconditional surrender signals on every known frequency. In the aftermath of what would later be recorded in Federation military archives as the impossible victory, rescue ships moved through the debris field like scavengers picking through the remains of gods. The wreckage of 32 Korthak vessels drifted in silent testament to human ingenuity while Admiral Zexhai found himself aboard his flagship in conversation with Captain Chen, who sat across from him still wearing her emergency survival suit and looking remarkably composed for someone who had just sacrificed her ship to win an unwinnable battle. "Captain, I have to ask, was any of that actually planned military doctrine, or were you improvising everything?" Zexhai inquired, his 4 arms gesturing in patterns that his species associated with profound intellectual confusion. Chin grinned, her human features animated with the satisfaction of victory and survival against impossible odds. "About 30% was standard human emergency protocols. The rest was pure human stubbornness, creative problem-solving, and our species' legendary refusal to accept defeat when innocent lives are at stake. We had exactly 3 hours to figure out how to fight 12-to-1 odds with a cargo ship masquerading as a military vessel." "A cargo ship?" Zexhai's voice climbed several octaves in his species' equivalent of shock. "The Defiant Hope was actually scheduled for decommission and scrapping next month," Chin explained with casual amusement. "We were transferring everything to permanent storage facilities when the Korthak fleet jumped into our system. All the junk we fired at them? It was literally our old furniture, personal belongings, and surplus equipment that we were moving out of active service." Zexhai's 4 arms gestured in what his species considered the ultimate expression of bewilderment. "But the precision calculations, the trajectory computations, the perfect timing." "Admiral, humans have been throwing rocks at things we want to kill since before we invented agriculture or written language," Chun replied matter-of-factly. "Give us sufficient time, motivation, and a clear target, and we'll figure out how to throw absolutely anything at absolutely anything else with lethal accuracy. The laws of physics aren't limitations, they're just guidelines that tell us what's possible. And the ship ramming maneuver? Zexhai asked, still struggling to process the tactical implications. Chen's expression grew thoughtful and serious. That wasn't planned doctrine, that was desperation transformed into opportunity. When you're facing complete annihilation, you use every tool available, including yourself. In that moment, my ship wasn't just a vessel. It was the biggest, most effective weapon I had available. Zexhai considered this revelation carefully. Your species file mentioned this tendency toward improvisation, but our xenopsychologists thought it was bureaucratic exaggeration. The report specifically stated, and I quote, humans will weaponize anything, including the concept of weaponization itself. Sounds about right, Chen nodded with obvious pride. We once had a saying back on Earth, the difference between screwing around and science is writing it down. Same principle applies to warfare and survival. The difference between random junk and an effective weapon is knowing how to use it properly. As they watched Federation recovery operations continue, Zexhai made a mental note to update the human species classification from moderate threat level to do not engage under any circumstances whatsoever. After all, if they could turn a teddy bear into an effective military weapon, what couldn't they accomplish?